This is The Toss-Up, where we take a look at some of the topics facing the world of sports, and then we dive deeper. Whether it's your best friend's fantasy team or the future of college athletics, we're just trying to expand the conversation. We just want to take a look at the topics that keep you tuned in to the beautiful world of sports. For the better half of a decade, LeBron James has owned our attention when it comes to basketball in June. He's made an appearance in every NBA Finals series since 2011. He's been backed by guys like Kyrie Irving, Dwayne Wade, and Chris Bosh throughout the past 7 years. But this year is a different story. His supporting cast is younger and less versatile than years past, and he dropped the first game of the postseason for the first time in what seems like eons. Elsewhere in the East, maybe this could be the Raptors' year to get over the hump. Out west, the Warriors are battling the injury bug and looking up at Houston, who owns home court advantage throughout the playoffs. Over the past 3 seasons, it's been reasonable to expect Golden State and Cleveland to face off in the finals. But this year, it's not only reasonable to think that won't happen, but it's reasonable to think that neither of those two teams make it to June. Will we see the matchup for a 4th straight year, or will the streak end? We'll have to wait and see. Hi, everybody. I'm Michael Dugan, and joining me on the panel this week, we've got Ben LADNER, host of the Long 2 NBA podcast, our very own IUSTV reporter, Michael TILKA, and our very own IUSTV co-sports director, Austin MATRICARDI. Playoffs are already underway, guys, but it's never too late to start talking about it. So the Rockets, best record in the NBA, won the West, obviously, in the regular season. Harden and Chris Paul said that it was love at first sight. It's been like a marriage for them. Do you buy that? Do they look like the favorites to win the West right now?
I think they do, yeah, especially when you throw in Steph Curry's health. We've seen what can happen when Steph Curry isn't fully right. He had a similar issue in 2 playoffs ago when they ended up losing to Cleveland in the finals. And I think, the Warriors would never come out and say, Steph would never come out and say that the knee was bothering him and that he wasn't 100%. But I think it was clear at that point in the season because he, obviously injured it against the Rockets earlier. So we've seen what kind of effect that can have. The way the Rockets are playing, Chris Paul, Clint Capella, James Harden, I mean, those guys are really clicking on all cylinders. That roster is just perfectly tailored to Paul and Harden's strengths. And, I've bought them kind of since the beginning of the year. I didn't buy them as the title favorites, but you throw in the Golden State Warriors' injury health, or their health concerns, and then just how well the Rockets have looked, I'm in on them.
I think I have to agree with Ben on this one. And I think the first thing I have to say, though, is that give the Rockets a lot of credit. A lot of people heading into the season were concerned, can James Harden and Chris Paul have this happy marriage? There's only one basketball, folks, but they've proved their doubters wrong. I think they have the absolute best shot at winning the West here. I think the only thing standing in their way is a potentially healthy Steph Curry. We don't know if that's going to happen yet, but I think the Rockets, regardless of whether Curry is healthy, I think they win the West.
I think that it's perfectly reasonable to look at the Rockets as the favorite to win the West. I just have this feeling that until I see James Harden and Chris Paul have, long-term success in the playoffs, I'm not going to necessarily say that they're the favorite.
Yeah.
I think that that's the big concern. Chris Paul is, people call him the point god. He's this legendary figure considering that he's still playing, and he's never made it to a conference finals. So I think that in order for me to really buy into the Rockets, I'm going to have to see them play multiple good series. And unfortunately, they won't play multiple good series until potentially the conference finals or the finals in themselves. So I think that I'm still buying into the Warriors as the favorites just because, we've seen videos surface of Steph Curry, practicing and playing and stuff now. So I think that he'll be healthy. I'm going to go with the Warriors as the favorite right now.
And they've still got 3 All-Stars on that team waiting for one more to come back.
Without Steph Curry, who might be the best shooter of all time, you still have Kevin Durant, Draymond Green, a few other guys that might be able to play basketball all right.
And I think if anyone can kind of ratchet up the intensity in the playoffs, it is the Warriors. I think they kind of coast through the regular season, and then when they really need to, they put it in high gear.
But I think what Houston's proved all season is that they are definitively the best team in the West. They had the not only the conference best, but the season league best. Excuse me, that was the word I was looking for. The league best record in the NBA. So I just have a hard time thinking that the Warriors are finally going to turn things around and overcome these Rockets.
Yeah.
We'll go from one quote-unquote marriage out west to another in the east, and that's DeMar DeRozan and Kyle Lowry. They seem to be clicking now more than ever before. Is this year their best shot at getting out of the east compared to years past?
I think so, and not necessarily because of the Raptors themselves, but I look at Cleveland, and that's such a flawed roster. LeBron James is obviously still at the peak of his powers, but the surrounding talent for a LeBron James-led team, forget the Cavs, you can throw in the Miami years, it's not as good as it's been in the past, and this is the year where, I never doubt LeBron James' ability to carry a team to the finals, but given the kind of strength, the relative strength in the rest of the East with the Raptors, the Sixers, you could even throw the Celtics in, although they're kind of banged up at the moment, but I just think there's better competition up and down than there has been in years past, and I just think Cleveland doesn't necessarily have the depth that they've had in recent years.
Yeah, I think that Ben really hit the nail right on the head there. It's not necessarily because the Raptors are better than they've been in the past. It's just because of the situation with Cleveland, where the supporting cast might not be up to par. Then you've got Kyrie Irving's knee injury, kind of hampering the Celtics. So I think that this is probably their best chance to make it out of the East. But because of factors outside of their control, and they're playing good basketball. They've brought in OG Anunoby, who's played a big role for them this year, despite not maybe necessarily putting up flashy numbers. So they've got good role players. DeRozan and Lowry are playing good basketball. Do I think they'll make it out of the East? Not necessarily, but I think they've got a good shot.
I would have to say that this team is finally playing with Raptor claws. And I think they're finally playing with those Raptor claws. And I think you guys brought up a good point in that it's not necessarily who's the best team in the East, but who has the least amount of weaknesses. We saw LeBron James and the Cleveland Cavaliers honestly get smacked by the Indiana Pacers. Indiana doesn't have the absolute best playoff experience. Boston would be a great team, but they're missing Gordon Hayward, they're missing Kyrie Irving. And then with Toronto, they just don't have the run to the championship like we've seen with a few other teams, and I think that's really the big thing holding them back. But I think they have great bench depth. I think they've looked the most dominant out of all the teams so far in the first round, and I think they have everything going for them moving forward.
Now, after game one of the series, a lot of people were freaking out that this could be the end to all of his streaks that he's had throughout the playoffs. After game two, were we reminded that the Eastern Conference still runs through LeBron James?
Yeah, I mean, you look at what LeBron James did in game two, and he's LeBron James. 46 points, 12 rebounds, 5 assists, and his team won. I mean, if somebody's going to win the series for the Cavs, it's LeBron James. And if there's one player that we know that the entire Eastern Conference runs through, you have to beat LeBron James, as we've seen over this big stretch where he's been to the finals every single year. He's probably been in the Eastern Conference Finals for a very long time, too. He might be the greatest player to ever do it, and you can't discredit that in a playoff series like this.
I think what this team this year reminds me of is the 07 Cavaliers, the one which LeBron put his whole team on his back and carried them to the NBA Finals. And I think he's doing that again this year, and with a roster that's very young, very inexperienced. And I think without him, this team doesn't even make the playoffs, in my opinion. So LeBron's still king, and he sits on that throne.
I agree. I mean, you look at what happens when LeBron's off the floor, and that team completely falls apart. They need him in every sense. And look, LeBron hasn't been perfect in this series. We saw in game one, he was lollygagging back in transition defense. He wasn't exerting quite the effort that you would expect to see from the game's best player in the opening game of a playoff series. And, he kind of reconciled that in game two and ratcheted up the intensity. But they're going to need him to do that for 40, 44 minutes almost every single game. And look, the guy's 33. He's in year 15. I'm not going to doubt his ability to bring it for 40 minutes every night. But the earlier he has to start doing that, I think the less likely it becomes that Cleveland reaches the finals. Because, I mean, in this entire run, LeBron's basically kind of walked through the first round every year, right? Mm-hmm. The Pacers, I think, are going to give the Cavs a good push. And if LeBron and the Cavs have to exert as much energy as they've had to through these first two games in round one, and it just gets more difficult each round from there, they're going to have a lot of mileage on those legs by the time they get to the conference finals, which could put them in a difficult spot as well.
Yeah, I think that you bring up an interesting point. You look at LeBron's historic effort levels, especially in the regular season, he's more relaxed. He doesn't necessarily exert his, full effort during the regular season. And then over the last 7 years, that's kind of carried over into the first round because he's had guys like Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh and Kyrie Irving and Kevin Love to rely on to, maybe I don't have to go as hard as I can for the entire game. But now he's kind of in a spot where he has to do that. If somebody's going to win this series, it's going to have to be LeBron because he doesn't have – he still has Kevin Love, but Kevin Love's not going to come out and win a game on his own at this point in his career, I think.
Yeah, and that phenomenon is actually one reason why I like the Raptors, maybe not more than the Cavs, but relative to years past, because you take some of that burden off of Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan. They have excellent bench depth, as y'all mentioned. You take some of that off of DeRozan and Lowry in the regular season, and their numbers aren't quite as good as they've been in the past years, but the flip side of that is they have more energy, hopefully fresher legs in the playoffs, and they're able to kind of carry the team a little bit more and have more gas down the stretch.
All right, well, we're going to cut to break here for a second, guys. But coming up after the break, our panel will play Make Your Case, and we're going to do our lightning round. So stick with us. Welcome back to the Toss-Up. We're talking NBA playoffs here. But before we continue, let's toss it over to Jimmy Sutton at the media wall. Jimmy?
Thanks, Michael. The NBA playoffs are among us, and it is a classic race for who can take home the Larry O'Brien Championship Trophy in the finals. It's been Cleveland and Golden State for 3 years in a row, but now the question arising around the media is, who can stop the Warriors in the Western Conference? The Golden State Warriors, a team who has seemed to be virtually impossible to stop in the last 3 seasons, have won 2 championships in that span. They break record after record and continue to be dominant. These records have consisted of anything from three-pointers made in a season to an NBA best regular season record of 73 wins and just 9 losses. And this breaks the 95-96 record of the Chicago Bulls with Michael Jordan. Then, after not only breaking these historic records, they add another NBA superstar in Kevin Durant to play alongside with Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and Draymond Green. Right as everyone thought they were at their best, they became better. This year, they had their struggles with injuries, and other teams have seemingly become better as well by adding other All-Stars. And one team that sticks out is the Houston Rockets. This year, they acquired the 9-time All-Star Chris Paul and have been unstoppable when he and MVP favorite for this season, James Harden, played together when healthy. Going into the All-Star break during the season, they were 21-1 when Harden, Paul, and Clint Capella all played together. This earned them a franchise and league-high 65 wins to receive the 1 seed in the West. The speculation continues to arise as we wonder who will stop the Golden State Warriors. Is this the year they finally become vulnerable? We'll have to wait and see. Back to you, Michael.
Thanks, Jimmy. All right, guys. Time for the lightning round. There's one rule. Your answers have to be 10 seconds or less. Wow. Sounds pretty simple. Okay, let's do it. First question. 2 teams, Cavs, Warriors. Do neither of these teams make it? Does one of them make it, or do they both make it to the NBA Finals?
That's a tough question. That's really complicated. God, at the moment, I would say one of them makes it, but I'm not sure which one it is, and I'm not sure which one doesn't make it. So I would say one, but I am completely unsure.
In this case, 1 is the loneliest number, and that's the number I'm going to have to go with.
Uno.
So we got a consensus 1 right there. Okay. Yes or no, the Raptors make it out of the East?
No.
I have to pull out the Raptor clause. I say yes.
Probably not. I would say Cleveland has a little bit better shot, although, maybe if the Raptors, maybe they do have the best shot in the East, but I would still take the field over them.
So outside of those 2 teams, Golden State and Cleveland, add in Houston and Toronto. What teams should we watch out for that could potentially make a run to the NBA Finals or their conference championship, or their conference finals, excuse me? Joel Embiid is back. Do you guys trust the process?
I do. I think that's a team that is very young, but is very talented and could make a deep run.
Look out in the sky. It's not a plane, but it is a bird. The New Orleans Pelicans have my eye.
Oh.
I actually agree. I was going to highlight both those teams. The Pelicans, Drew Holiday is playing fantastic basketball. Anthony Davis is Anthony Davis, and Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons are going to be 2 of the probably 3 or 4 best players in any series they play.
All right, it's the end of the lightning round. You guys can elaborate from here on out as long as you'd like. Make your case. It's time for Make Your Case, where everybody here will make their case for a team or a player, depending on the question. The first question is the Eastern Conference champ. Ben, make your case.
Oh boy, I'm got to stick with LeBron James and the Cavs. I vowed to myself long ago that I would never bet against LeBron until he proved me wrong, and even then I might still go with him. So I'm going to keep picking whatever team LeBron's on to get to the finals every year until it doesn't happen, and this year's no different.
I think you guys all know where I'm going with this. I got to pull out the Raptor clause once more. Toronto is just the team in the East. I think it's a question of who has the least amount of weaknesses in this Eastern Conference, because there isn't necessarily a team that looks strong or looks like they can charge ahead. And the more I look at Toronto and the more I watch their performance against Washington, they've been absolutely dominant. They've been getting the minutes they need off their bench. OG Anunoby, former Indiana Hoosier, looking phenomenal. I think he's got a good case for first team all-rookie this year. I just think they have all the pieces put together. I'm not sure why so many people are doubting this team, but it's got to be Raptors.
I'll make a quick counter argument to that.
There they are
I think
again.
it also matters what your biggest weakness is and how it matches up with a hypothetical biggest strength of another team. And in this case, I think LeBron James is that biggest strength, and the Raptors' potential weak spot there could be who guards him. OG Anunoby and Pascal Siakam are probably the options there. Neither of them has proven it. And I would need to see that for at least a game or two before I really feel comfortable, because look, you can have all the talent in the world on your team, and if you don't have a guy that can credibly defend LeBron James, and most teams don't, you're not going to stand much of a chance. And so I want to see it from those two guys, see how they match up against him and how effective they can be slowing him down. If they can prove that, I'm right there with you.
Fair enough.
Well,
Here we are.
I am going to trust the process here, guys.
Wow.
Philadelphia 76ers, Eastern Conference champions. They're finally here. They finally made it to the end of the road. They'll make it to the finals this year. Ben Simmons is so good, and he's a very deserving Rookie of the Year. He hasn't been named yet, but he will be. We all know this.
I agree.
Thank you, Ben. But they've been playing really good basketball of late. They had a huge stretch where they played really well to end the season without Joel Embiid, which is crazy because he's one of the best players in the league, best young players, brightest young stars, whatever you want to refer to him as, he's that. So they're getting ready to get him back potentially in Game 3 of the series against the Heat. That could be a huge turning point between Simmons and Embiid. Markelle Fultz is back. Robert Covington, Dario Saric. These are some great young players. I think that Philly fans have a huge reason to be very excited. I think that basketball fans in general should be very excited because this should be a really fun team for a really long time, and they could potentially start that this season.
The only thing that concerns me with the Sixers, I think they have all the talent there. The question is the mentality and the maturity, because when you see your star player post on his Instagram story that he's sick and tired of being treated like a baby, that brings up some major concerns for me and where this team is going forward, where all of their heads are at. And I think people are undermining just how good of a player Dwayne Wade is. I think he's going to go down as one of the most underappreciated NBA players of all time. The guy's got 3 rings. And yeah, you could say, oh, 2 of those are LeBron's and 1 of them is Shaquille O'Neal's. But the guy has been playing out of his mind for these first 2 games. And I don't think the Sixers will even get past the Heat. I think the Heat and Dwayne Wade just overpower them. South Beach will be cooking. If you can't take the Heat, get out the kitchen.
I'm interested to see if they get past the Heat, how Simmons handles kind of defenses adjusting to him a little bit more, because I think as you get deeper and deeper in the playoffs, I think that does become a little bit more of an issue where teams are just going to go under on picks against him. How does he navigate that? What are his counters to that? And how does he, remain effective even without that jump shot? That's a big question to me. But, I mean, when the Sixers are clicking, they are as good as anyone in the Eastern Conference. And when they get Embiid back, they have as much talent as anyone. And so I could certainly see a scenario in which they get to the finals. I don't necessarily think it'll play out, but I could certainly see that path.
Going back to the Embiid Instagram post that you brought up, you say tomato, I say tomato. I think that it actually just shows, in my opinion, it shows that Embiid is ready to get on the floor. He's pumped up. He's ready to go and get in to play to play playoff basketball. I think that you could take that message and portray it 2 different ways. neither of us are inside of Joel Embiid's head, probably for the better.
I don't want to be.
I don't want to be in his head. So I think that we'll have to wait and see how he plays once he gets on the floor, but I think he's obviously a big add for this team. I think that their youth is definitely a weakness, but it's also a strength because they don't have the miles on their legs that some of these other teams have, like LeBron James.
All right. Other side of the league, the Western Conference champ is going to be?
I've got to go with Houston. You know, I thought before the season they could take a healthy Golden State team to 7, and now that the Warriors aren't healthy, I think I would lean a little bit towards the Rockets. It's probably, 40% Rockets, maybe 50% Rockets, 50% the field. It is really, really close, but I just they've been playing so well recently, and I don't know how you guard this team. I really don't. When James Harden and Chris Paul get in a pick and roll, they can do whatever they want. They are surgical in picking apart defenses. Houston can space the floor as well as anybody in the entire league. They've got a versatile, switchable defense that can switch 1 through 5. PJ Tucker, Luc Baamute have been really big additions for them and have had fantastic seasons. They're going to continue to be X factors. I just think, it goes back to kind of what you were saying, the fewest weaknesses. Golden State, I think, has a little bit higher upside because we've just seen it before. But Steph Curry's health is uncertain. Draymond Green's health even is uncertain. Klay Thompson, uncertain. I just think Houston, at the moment, has fewer weaknesses.
It's just a great time for Houston. Beyonce Knowles, a Houston native, just had the performance of her life at Coachella, and I think the Houston Rockets are in for the same type of performance. I think, like you said, and like Jimmy said, Clint Capella, James Harden, Chris Paul heading into the All-Star break 21-1. That's just inconceivable just of how good of a performance that is. And I think just like you said, just the Golden State has these injury issues and sort of these question marks that we don't have answers to yet. So for the time being, I think it's got to be Houston.
And I think that number's up to like 43 and 3 now.
It's something ridiculous.
It's even
like
more
that.
astronomical.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm going to be contrarian again. I'm going to go with the Golden State Warriors. I just think that we've seen it so many times. They're so good. They've got 4 potential future Hall of Famers. All of that stuff. They've got the greatest record, blah, 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 whatever. They're the Golden State Warriors. Until somebody beats them, I'm not going to doubt them.
All right, last question. NBA champion, putting you guys on the spot.
Houston. I mean, I think whoever comes out of the West is probably going to win the title. I just don't think anyone in the East really has enough, a good enough combination of depth and firepower. So I think either Houston or Golden State, whoever it ends up being. I guess I just picked the Rockets to come out of the West, so I'll pick the Rockets.
Houston, time and time again, has proven that they are the best team in the NBA at this moment. So got to go with Houston.
Well, I agree with Ben. Whoever comes out of the West takes it. I picked the Warriors. So the Warriors are my NBA champion. I think healthy Steph Curry comes back. He helps this team. He makes them so much better, like he always has, and they win a championship again.
All right, well, we've reached the end of our discussion tonight. It's time for last word. What is everyone's last word, final thoughts on the NBA playoffs this year?
Mine's not going to be a word, but a gesture. And you all know what this
There
is.
it is.
Excitement. I think that in every sport, once you get to the playoffs, once you get to the postseason, everything just gets so much more tense. It's win or go home, to use an old cliche, but it is, and it's a reason for fans to be excited because these guys are playing for their seasons. Everything they've done up to this point is leading to what they're doing right now. They're playing for what they've been working for their whole lives.
Yeah, I'll give one that kind of dovetails with that. Uncertainty. I think the last 3 years we've seen it's been the same 2 teams, and it's kind of been a foregone conclusion. And the first 2 rounds the first 2 series of each round really have been a foregone conclusion. And I think this year there's more candidates than ever to come out of either conference. And I just think the field of potential champions is a lot deeper than it has been in the past. And that's really exciting to me.
All right, I couldn't put it any better. Win or go home, uncertainty.
Raptor clause.
And the
baby.
clause.
Raptor clause.
All right, well, that does it for the show this week. But be sure to continue the discussion on our Twitter page at IUSTV Sports and on Facebook at IUSTV Sports. You can always give any suggestions for the show and ask any questions you may have. Toss it up. Find out if we'll catch it. We'll see you next time.